Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the federal laws that impact your work as a dental hygienist. So stay tuned. We're going to be covering a lot of the different acts that have been passed that impact your work. All right, welcome back to the Grow RDH channel. Today we're going to be talking about federal employment laws, and this is really important for you to know because it protects you as an employee. As dental hygienists, in most states, we have to work under the supervision of a dentist. This may be changing across the nation. There are a few states that allow independent practice and allow you to be business owners. But at this current time, that is not necessarily true for most states. So we're going to be talking about, for the majority of us, when we are employees, what rights do we have and how do we protect those rights in an employment situation? The importance here is that it protects you as an employee from unfair employment practices. And so all of these different acts can impact your work as a dental hygienist. It's important for you to really track and document these things, making sure that you're not put in an unsafe situation, you're not put into a situation that might cause some legal implications. And so for you, we can report these things. We can obviously always obtain legal counsel. And I just want to say throughout this lecture, I am not a lawyer. And so if you feel like your situation falls under any of these laws, please contact legal counsel and make sure that you're getting expert law advice and how to handle these. Before we get into the specific acts, I want to cover the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And I want to cover this first because I'm going to be referencing that the EEOC enforces a lot of these laws. And so these are going to be the people that you're going to be in contact with if you feel that your rights have been violated. Specifically, they handle complaint filing. So if you are going to make a complaint against your employer, they are going to be the ones that you are going to file a complaint with. They enforce most of the labor laws, and we'll talk about which ones specifically and who enforces what. But the EEOC really does the bulk work of this. So what do they actually do? The EEOC will do the initial investigation. When you make a complaint, they will investigate by interviewing witnesses, gathering evidence, and looking into the situation. They will essentially make a decision. They will decide if they need mediation or conciliation. They will either help you resolve it through working with the employer to make sure that they're changing their policies, or they will send you a letter saying that you have the grounds to sue. And so if you want to take legal action, they will either take legal action for you or they will give you a right to sue letter. This means that they've found in your case that there is enough evidence to seek legal action against your employer. So let's get into the acts. The first act we're going to talk about is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically Title VII within this act. This is obviously enforced by the EEOC, and it protects you as an employee from discrimination, and it protects you from a discrimination of a number of different things. These include race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Now, a lot of the times, these specific acts only apply to businesses if they meet certain criteria. And for this act, they have to have 15 or more employees. Unfortunately, a lot of the times a dental practice might be smaller. And so there are times where some of these things won't apply. It doesn't mean that they're right or wrong and they shouldn't be doing those practices. It just means that federal action may not be able to be taken against them because they don't meet the criteria of having 15 or more employees. So the original Civil Rights Act was 1964. For women, they enacted an amendment. This amendment was specifically for pregnancy, and this was done in 1979. Because it's under the same act, it's also enforced by the EEOC. And this protects women from being fired or from being denied a job due to pregnancy or anything that goes along with pregnancy. So childbirth, complications, any missed work, any medical conditions that might result from pregnancy. It also says that they can't force you to leave. So if you are coming up on the birth, they can't force you to take maternity leave either before or after your pregnancy. It also obligates that they hold your job open during your leave. This is directly related to the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, which we'll get to in a little bit. But for now, just know that your job is protected if you were to get pregnant and have a child and take maternity leave. The next one is Age Discrimination in Employment Act, ADEA, ADEA. This act was put into place in 1967, and this is a standalone act. This is an amendment to any different acts. This is strictly on its own. This is also enforced by the EEOC. This prohibits discriminating against wage or job hiring, firing, anything like that for people 40 years and older. The criteria here is that you have to have 20 plus employees in your business. The next act is the Fair Labor Standards Act. This was in place in 1938. So this is one of the oldest acts that we have in regards to employment. This is a really important one, and this is different because it is enforced the wage and hour division of the Department of Labor. Basically, this act is making sure that you are getting paid fairly for your work. This might relate to minimum wage and child labor, but specifically for dental hygiene, this especially refers to overtime pay. Anything over 40 hours a week is considered overtime and should be paid at least time and a half. Now, there are a few exemptions to this. This includes like salary work. If you're given a salary for the year, a lot of the times they don't track hours. You're getting paid a lump sum for the production of what you're doing. Also, contract work. If you enter a contract, you may not be an hourly employee. And again, this wouldn't relate to you. This is important when thinking about entering into a contract. Sometimes this is kind of a workaround for employers to get dental hygienists to be tied to a specific office. Contracts aren't very common, but they are popping up a lot more. And before you sign a contract, please have legal counsel at least look at the contract to make sure you're not signing something that is going to limit you in terms of employment options. A lot of the times, contracts might have a non-compete clause in them. And if you live in an area where there are multiple dental offices and you sign a non-compete, that means that when you leave, you are not allowed to work in a certain radius, like a 10-mile radius or something. So really important to keep in mind when we're signing contracts. In order to qualify for the Federal Labor Standards Act, the business needs to either engage in interstate commerce, meaning they're working with other states, or they have consumers from other states entering into their business, or they have over $500,000 in annual revenue. Another really great amendment to the FLSA is the Equal Pay Act, or the EPA. This was put in place in 1963, and this is specifically to make sure that men and women get equal pay. This makes sure that you are not discriminated on based on your sex. Now, a lot of the times this can kind of be worked around. Again, you have to make sure that the situations are the same, that the same man and woman are doing the same type of job in the same establishment under the same conditions. So there's a lot of things here that have to kind of meet this. That's why the pay gap, or the gender pay gap, is still showing some discrepancies. But it does help to make sure that that gap is being reduced. The next act is one that keeps you safe. This is the Occupational Health and Safety Act. This was enacted in 1970, and it makes sure that our workspaces are safe. This is enforced by the Department of Labor, and this is such a big piece of the Department of Labor that they have their own administration. It's the OSHA administration. They make sure that your employer provides you with a safe workplace that is free from hazard. A lot of the times we think of like hard labor jobs, a construction site or something like that. But in healthcare, there is also a lot of dangerous situations that we might get into. So it's important for us to understand and know that this protects healthcare as well. The specific protections that are written into this act that relate to healthcare include the bloodborne pathogen standards. This makes sure that all medical and dental facilities handle bloodborne pathogens appropriately. It also is written into the PPE, or personal protective equipment. This makes sure that your employer provides you with the necessary PPE to do your job safely. And then finally, the hazard communication standard makes sure that you understand the materials that you're working with. We in the dental office have a material safety data sheet, and that material safety data sheet should include all of the chemicals, the products, anything that you work with regularly, and the hazards that they have. And so this is usually a big electronic file, or some people still use paper, big binder, but it's full of the information for each product that you work with. There are a few requirements for your employer. In order to fall under this, they have to have 10 or more employees. They also have to have reporting standards. So in the case of a minor incident or a minor employee situation, they have to document and track these incidents. Now, if there was a major infraction or a major accident where someone was injured, then you have to report that directly to OSHA. And if it's not reported or it was mishandled, there are some consequences for the employer. The next one is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this was put into place in 1990. This is enforced by the EEOC and the Department of Justice. But when we're talking about employment situations, a lot of the times they go directly to EEOC. The Department of Justice typically deals more with consumers. And so under this, there's multiple titles. And so this would be Title I. Title I specifically deals with employment. So you would likely complain to the EEOC. This act prohibits discrimination against individuals that have disabilities. And this involves anything. This can be in the job application process, so the hiring, the firing, getting the job. It also has to do with advancement within the company or within the business, the way that they're paid, making sure they're compensated fairly for the work that they're doing, and the training. The limitations here are that the employer has to have 15 or more employees, and there is kind of a caveat here. They have to make sure that one, the person is able to do the job necessary that they were hired for, and they have to provide reasonable accommodations, but those accommodations can't put undue hardship on the business. So a lot of the times, again, that is a workaround that employers can kind of use to make sure that they're still able to function as a business. The next one is the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. A lot of the times people kind of associate this with pregnancy leave because that's probably the most common use of this act. This act was enacted in 1993, and this actually covers all medical leave, right? So if you have to take care of a family member or you yourself get injured in an accident, this act provides all employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. And that's the key here. They're not mandating that the employer pay you for that leave, but they are mandating that your job is protected during that leave. So you can take up to 12 weeks unpaid and your job is protected throughout that process. One important thing to note here is the retaliation, right? So an employer can't retaliate against you or fire you later or not give you a raise because you chose to take leave for medical reasons. This obviously has to be documented, so you would have documentation from whatever healthcare provider is saying that that leave is a necessity, so a doctor, PA, something like that. And the requirements here is that there's 50 plus workers in your business and you have been employed for up to 12 months. There is an hour stipulation. I think it's around 1,200 hours in that year. If you recently were hired and you don't have that hour time limit or you haven't been there for 12 months, you wouldn't yet qualify. But this is an important leave because it does directly relate to pregnancy. A lot of the times that's why maternity leaves are 12 weeks, because it is protected under FMLA. So those are all the acts that really impact you as a dental hygienist and as an employee of a dental practice. It's important for you to know your role, right? We want to make sure that we document any incidences or anything that you might want to complain against your employer. But before you do that, you have to make sure that you understand these rights and you understand the acts and how they're written to make sure that what you're actually experiencing is protected under the federal labor laws. So make sure you know these, make sure you know prior to taking a job what your rights are. And if you're ever unsure, it is always important, and I always recommend, please seek legal counsel. If you are going to sign a contract, if you're going to file a complaint, make sure you are educated prior to doing so. Make sure it falls under the correct act. Make sure you're complaining to the right person. And again, if you're unsure, a lawyer will help you with all that. A lawyer will know exactly where to go, who to talk to, and make sure that your case has enough evidence and documentation, and they will help you to understand what type of documentation you might need. So go forth confident in the workplace and make sure that you are protecting yourself. This is your job, this is your livelihood, and you deserve these rights. I hope this was helpful in understanding employment rights. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.